The Local Show, sponsored by Victory in Motion, home of knee repair, not knee replacement, on News Radio 570 WSYR, on 106.9 FM, and live everywhere on the iHeartRadio app. The Local Show features in-depth conversation with business owners, employees, and influential business leaders throughout Central New York, exploring their successes, challenges, and reasons for doing business right here in our growing community. The Local Show is produced locally by Zoe Advertising. Now your hosts, Tom and Steve.
You found your way back to The Local Show, and if you're here, then we are too. So we appreciate you stopping by. We're broadcasting from the Zoe Advertising Studios, sponsored by Victory in Motion, the home of knee repair, not knee replacement. And you can see us on YouTube as well, and all that. So make sure you give us a like when you go on the YouTube channel, and you want to look at some of the past, what do you call these things? Episodes, I guess. Yes.
Crime scenes.
Right.
Crime scenes.
Look at some of the past ones and subscribe, and then you'll get notified every time we put out a new video, which is every week we put out 8 segments.
Well, you do. You edit those up nicely, Tom.
Thank you.
You trim them up, and they're kind of fun to watch. It's a different dimension. So 99.9% of people listen to the show. Some people watch it on YouTube.
Well, and sometimes we have to edit things out for time. You know, we have to talk faster and this and that. Here you get the whole unbridled version.
Get it all
on YouTube. You get it all right there. All right, Steve, you know, something we didn't talk about quickly before we talked to Mike Woodford here. You have a compliment line, an adulation line.
Adulation
where
line.
People can text you.
Call us, not call us, well, text us. Who do you want to hear? Who don't you want to hear? What do you like? What don't you like? 216-0273 is the text number, 216-0273. The Steve Roberts text adulation line. Let's just call it what it is, Tom.
That's it. All right, Mike Woodford is here with us. He's the owner of Woodford Barn Repair. How are you, Mike?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Well, it's good to see you. WoodfordBarnRepair.com. There's some nice pictures on there, folks, if you want to follow along. WoodfordBarnRepair.com. So, Mike, give us your history a little bit. I know, did you start like back in 1965 or somebody else did?
Well, my dad and his 3 brothers started Woodford Brothers back then.
Okay.
And back in the day, they were doing additions and pole constructions, that sort of thing. Then around 1972 or 3, we had a fellow that came to work for us named Francis Gravelding, and he talked my dad into going out and working on some old timber frame barns. Mm-hmm. And my dad was a pretty good business person. He recognized that there was a niche market there that really wasn't being serviced, so he decided to start expanding into that more. So Woodford Brothers, at that time grew to a sizable amount of barns that we did every year, around 200 barns that we'd work on.
That's a lot of barns.
Yeah.
Although, so what was your footprint? Like, how far away would you go from New York State, or would you just stay in New York State?
Back early on, it was mostly just New York State.
Okay, gotcha.
When my brother and I took over after 1996, when my dad passed away, we expanded from Maine to Minnesota.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm a pilot. I got a little plane, so we're literally flying.
What do you
guys.
got?
No kidding.
Cessna 210.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So we'd fly guys, around the country to fix these barns, and the territory really was dictated by where the barns are. Mm-hmm. The barns were built in the Northeast primarily to deal with our weather that we have. Real heavy boned, timber frame structures that can stand up for literally thousands of years if you take care of them right. And because that's where the barns were, that's where we had done our work.
Talk to me about timber frame. I don't know what a timber frame means.
Well, if you're familiar with the term mortise and tenon joint, like in furniture making.
No, I'm not.
Where you basically you make a pocket in the wood, and then you make another piece that would fit into that pocket and put a pin through it, and that's timber framing.
Gotcha.
Kind of explained pretty quickly there.
Yeah. How the heck do you have to have special tools for that? Like, how did people do it, back when the Amish were building these barns?
Well, early on, up until 1800, they did what was considered scribe rule construction, where they would take the timbers and lay them over top of each other. Yeah. And every joint throughout the frame would be a custom construction for that particular intersection of timbers. And then in 1800, they switched over to what was called square rule timber framing, which meant that they went through the barn and they standardized all the joints to one size. So it allowed them to use jigs and tools they could mass produce the joinery a lot faster.
I gotcha.
It was still a lot of the same idea, but they just sped the process up a little bit.
Well, now you use power tools, I would imagine, to make those cuts.
Sure do.
Yeah.
So if a barn is falling down, either you fix it or someone fixes it, or that's it, Sally, mop up the pieces.
Yeah. So for a typical project for us, we've just discovered that we can fix them generally for less than what it would cost to tear it down and then replace it with a similar size structure like a pole barn. Mm-hmm. And then if you really understand the structures, you would know that a pole barn is just not even close to the construction of a timber frame barn.
Can you explain what a pole barn is for the audience?
A pole barn is where we would go out and basically dig holes in the ground, stick the pole down into the hole. That mm-hmm. becomes the foundation and part of the framing in one quick step. And then you attach to it the siding and roofing and all of that. So it's a type of construction that lasts about 40 or 50 years until the poles start to deteriorate, which is usually about the same time the siding and the roofing are all going bad. So they're kind of a disposable structure.
And the poles are made out of metal?
No, these are pressure treated timber.
So
yep. A lot smaller than what you'd see in the old barns. These are all 6x6s. Or if you get into some of the early pole barns, they used round poles, which were basically telephone poles that somebody had acquired somehow or another and used them to build barns out of.
How many barns are used for farmers nowadays, or have people are using them to store their cars or to recreate or to put a wedding venue on? Because barns aren't just barns these days.
Yeah, so the latter is the case. Modern farming really doesn't use the old timber frame barns very much. Some of them are still storing hay in them. If they have horses and they need square bales, they'll use those because they work perfectly for it.
Right.
But the modern 3,000 cow dairy farms, they just don't really have a use for the old timber frames. So there's so many of them around still. Our typical customer is somebody who bought a piece of property, the house, and it's got a barn on it, and they like it to store the stuff like you just mentioned, the ATV and the boat and all that stuff. So they want to preserve it because they like the structure. They understand they have a piece of history that they would like to be good a steward of, and frankly they have the money to actually fix them up. The farmers, they may have money, but they have other priorities. They're not going to spend a lot of money on an old timber frame barn that they really just can't use, in their day-to-day operation.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you get many people calling you and saying, hey, look, I want to put together a venue or I want to make a thing.
Yeah.
Can you build me something from scratch?
Not so much from scratch, but we primarily repair existing structures.
Okay.
And we get that query all the time where we're going out and, looking at a barn to bring it up to snuff structurally so that they can use it for that. There's, things to consider. Is the floor even? Can people actually go in there and walk around and not trip over stuff?
Tough, yeah.
So there's things like that will help folks address it.
Where does your work start and where does it finish? So, Tom, great question. Hey, we want to make this into a party venue or someplace where we can entertain. You make it so it doesn't fall down, fix the foundations. Do you do more than that, or then do you hand it off to a GC or somebody else to do that, or do you just get out of the way?
Well, depending on the location, if we're traveling to, let's say the suburbs of Boston, we'll know then that we're best suited to handle the structural end of the work, take care of that, get the structure all up to snuff, and then have them find somebody local who can do the roofing and siding and the finish type carpentry. But here locally, where we can be competitive with that sort of work, we've become much more adept at doing that. So now we have the capacity to actually go out and do decent siding and roofing and all of that stuff to make the buildings look nice when we're done.
Are they always a wood floor, or do you have to pour concrete in a barn?
Case by case study.
Is it? Okay.
It's a lot of them have wood floors, which if you're trying to store an antique car or something in there, it's perfect for.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Parking an old car on concrete, there's a lot of moisture and it's not good for them. With the wood floor, you really don't have that. So if you have that and you want to use it for that purpose, it's a good idea to try to save it.
I love redeeming old stuff. Sure. I don't know. To me, there's something that it was old. It had a great life, and then it faded, and it was brought back to have a new life. You see old houses or barns. When they're done, do you paint them? Do people still paint barns, and why are they red?
The red was used a lot back in the day because it was just such a common color, and the raw materials were available for it. So that's what got used a lot of times. As you travel around the country, you'll find that there's pockets where there'll be white barns, and just like the material that was used to make a white barn was readily available. So it's really about the local sourcing of materials and what was the most common.
So Woodford Barn Repair, that seems pretty easy.
Yeah.
WoodfordBarnRepair.com. And there's an 800 number, 800-653-2276. But go to Woodford Barn Repair and say, hey, maybe we can save this thing. Or maybe we're looking to buy in a property that has a barn. I imagine you could take a look at it and kick the tires.
Sure.
That would be great. Appreciate you being here.
Thank you.